And this morning, as our opening words, I share with you some further quotes by Nelson Mandela that I have been drawn to this week. And they resonate well with the theme of this morning's sermon, as did our chalice lighting. I am fundamentally an optimist, he said. Whether that comes from nature or nurture, I cannot say. Part of being optimistic is keeping one's head pointed toward the sun, one's feet moving forward. There were many dark moments when my faith in humanity was sorely tested, but I would not and could not give myself up to despair. The greatest glory in living, he said, lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. I am not a saint, he said, unless you think of a saint as a sinner who keeps on trying. Spirit of life, be with us in this time of prayer. Help us to feel the rhythm of our own breathing, to quiet the chatter in our heads, to feel at home in our bodies. Help us to feel grounded and centered, to embrace the stillness. Comfort us in our sadness. Accompany us in our joy. Hold us in our unknowing. Spirit of life, be with us when we leave this sanctuary. Help us to carry with us the strength of connectedness, the warmth of companionship, the energy of community. Enfold us in a sense of spirit. Move with us in grace. Soothe us in our wounded places. Forgive us our missteps. Spirit of life, we ask this of you, knowing that we are your hands in this world, and that the answer to this prayer comes when we begin to do all of this for and with each other. Amen. Our reading this morning is by Rebecca Parker. Your gifts, whatever you discover them to be, can be used to bless or curse the world. The mind's power, the strength of the hands, the reaches of the heart, the gift of speaking, listening, imagining, seeing, waiting, any of these can serve to feed the hungry, bind up the wounds, welcome the stranger, praise what is sacred, do the work of justice, or offer love. Any of these can draw down the prison door, hoard bread, abandon the poor, obscure what is holy, comply with injustice, or withhold love. You must answer this question: what will you do with your gifts? Choose to bless the world. The choice to bless the world is more than an act of will, a moving forward into the world with the intention to do good. It is an act of recognition, a confession of surprise, a grateful acknowledgement that in the midst of a broken world, unspeakable beauty, grace, and mystery abide. There is an embrace of kindness that encompasses all life, even yours. And while there is injustice or evil, there moves a holy disturbance, a benevolent rage, a revolutionary love, protesting, urging, insisting that which is sacred will not be defiled. Those who bless the world live their life as a gesture of thanks for this beauty and this rage. The choice to bless the world can take you into solitude, to search for the sources of power and grace, healing and liberation. More, the choice will draw you into community, the endeavor shared, the heritage passed on, the companionship of struggle, the importance of keeping faith, the life of ritual and praise, the comfort of human friendship, the company of earth, its chorus of life welcoming you. None of us alone can save the world. Together, that is another possibility waiting. A Unitarian Universalist is at a religious revival. He is moved by the Spirit. He closes his eyes, puts his hands in the air and says, "Use me, O Lord, use me in an advisory capacity." I want to change the world, says my colleague Richard Gilbert, but Tuesdays I play tennis. And because it is almost Christmas and I've been scouring around for holiday stories, here's a selection from an interview with the innkeeper in Bethlehem. Interviewer: "It said the star was bright enough to lead the 3 wise men to your inn." Innkeeper: "Well, 3 men showed up at the inn. I don't know how wise they were." Interviewer: "How do you mean?" Innkeeper: "Well, the baby's born, right? And then these guys show up and they say, 'We have brought gifts for the child.' And I say, 'That's nice. What did you bring?' And they say, 'We have brought gold and frankincense and myrrh.' And I say, 'You've got to be kidding.'" Interviewer: "What's wrong with that?" Innkeeper: "Let me quote another Christmas song for you. A child shivers in the cold. Let us bring him silver and gold." Really? Silver and gold? And not, oh, I don't know, a blanket? There is a lot of humor to be found if we can take ourselves more lightly in our attempts to be gift givers and world savers. This morning, I want to talk about the pitfalls of volunteering. And I'll tell you up front that I have a lot of training in volunteer management, but most of what I know about being a good volunteer comes from my own mistakes and missteps as a volunteer. I have dropped out of an after-school mentoring program because I didn't know how to insert myself into the kids' conversations, and I felt useless. I have donated items that ultimately were destined for the trash. I have missed opportunities to learn from those I volunteered to help. I have felt ownership over projects that I worked on for several days, rather than recognizing that they really belong to the people who actually live there. I have felt superior and thought I knew the best way. I have said the wrong thing. A lot of wrong things, actually. But I still volunteer. It's the only way I can think of to bless the world. And what I hope has been the outcome of all these missteps is that I am now a slightly better volunteer. And sometimes I can check myself before making the same mistakes again. At the Urban Ministry, I helped to develop a volunteer handbook that we gave out to all of our incoming volunteers. One page of it was a list of standards of excellence developed by other Boston organizations in our area. It's so good that I've made copies of it for all of you and put them in your order of service. It's the yellow sheet. Please don't read them during my sermon. I know, that's the danger of a good handout. This morning, I want to share a few of these tips with you, along with some stories that have brought them alive for me. And when you get home, you can read the rest of them. Tip number 1, consider your motivation. When I was going to divinity school at BU School of Theology, I lived in Coolidge Corner, and I would walk from Brookline to the BU campus. Often I passed a man asking for change outside of the Dunkin' Donuts in my neighborhood. One day, when I was in a particularly crummy mood, as I set off for class, I passed by him, and he asked for money for a cup of coffee. I walked past. I got about 3 more blocks down the road before I stopped in my tracks and thought, I don't have much, I can't do much, but I can certainly buy that man a cup of coffee. I walked back and said to the man, let's go inside. I'll buy you a cup of coffee. He looked at me and without missing a beat said, I don't drink Dunkin' Donuts. Volunteering, trying to save the world, is a tricky business. Often it asks us to re-examine our motivations and interests. Rarely is it a selfless act. Despite what we tell ourselves about our own altruism, we are looking to get something out of it, either gratitude or a sense of purpose, or even just the self-satisfaction of having done something good. And this isn't wrong. But it's good to know that we have these expectations. And it's good to hold them lightly for those times when it just doesn't work out that way. Tip 2, ask what would be most helpful. I can't remember where I first heard this story, but it has stuck with me. A woman was volunteering in a poor village. One day she saw a family of children waiting for their mother to return. It was obvious that they were very hungry. The woman went over to comfort them, and in their tiny house she saw a small basket of eggs. Moved by their hunger, she went inside and cooked up all the eggs for them to eat. But for some reason, the children didn't want to eat the eggs. The woman realized why when their mother came home. She explained that the eggs were for the family to sell at the market to earn enough money to buy food for the family for the week. It's so important that we ask what would be helpful. Sometimes our own assessment of the situation isn't accurate, especially when we come from different backgrounds and cultures. Tip 3, have a learner's attitude. I can't remember if I've told you this story before, but each year at the urban ministry, the volunteers and I would work with the youth to plant and tend raised bed gardens in our front yard, and we would talk about urban gardening. One week we decided to do some cooking from the garden with the young people. On the menu were sage butter carrots, tortellini with fresh basil pesto, and herb chicken. It was so much fun to be in the garden with the teens. We taught them what all the different herbs were. We watched as they pulled up carrots for the first time. The volunteers and I were in our element in the garden, sharing with others our deep appreciation for nature and for feeling connected to the earth. The lesson continued in the kitchen. Both tortellini and pesto were foreign to the kids, so I led a small group of girls through the steps olive oil and pine nuts and Parmesan cheese into the food processor, tons of our gorgeous basil. Then it came time to prep the chicken. We had a French herbed chicken in mind to go with the sage butter carrots. But the girls had other plans for those birds. Instantaneously, I watched the tentative teens become confident and adept as they skillfully cleaned and prepped the chickens. They rolled up their sleeves and clanged their bangle bracelets and got right to work, removing everything from the cavity of the chicken and rinsing it in the sink. Then they worked as a team to slice lemons and rub them all over and under the skin, leaving the juiced halves in the cavity. They had done this before. I stepped back in amazement. This is how we do it in Jamaica, they explained. The girls opened the cabinets and began to search for the familiar dried spices: onion powder, cayenne pepper, allspice, garlic powder. At first, our lead volunteer for the day was horrified. No, she said. We have fresh herbs here. We're making it the French way. I tried to make eye contact with her, to give her the message to let the kids go ahead. But I saw a familiar look on her face, one that has been on my face all too often, the look of a leader losing control, the look of a plan going out the window. It was a few more minutes until she was able to see what I had come to see in that moment, the door opening to a moment of grace where the teacher could become the student and the student the teacher. When we let go a little of our carefully laid plans, we saw how proud these girls were of their knowledge and of their culture, that they were more engaged than they had been all day, that they were owning these chickens, that they were teaching us. Be open to the moments where you can learn, where the people you came to help you. Tip number 4, recognize your own limitations. Last fall, a distant relative of mine passed away in Connecticut. I was called upon to do the graveside service. I woke up very early to drive off the Cape, met my mother at the park and ride across the bridge, and the two of us carpooled down to the cemetery in Connecticut where the service was to take place. By the time we got to the Connecticut border, my eyes were watering, my nose was running, and I was sneezing every other minute. Oh, great, I thought. This is going to go really well. Even my voice was becoming extremely nasal. How did I get sick so quickly? I whined. My mother handed me another tissue, took a look at the wildflowers I had brought for people to lay on the grave during the service, and said, "Well, it could have something to do with this ragweed in your bouquet." We stopped at a gas station and together picked out all of the fluffy yellow sprigs that were wreaking so much havoc. More on this later. Tip 5, care about relationships. This includes being willing to admit when you are wrong, to apologize when you've made a mistake. You won't believe how many missteps can be forgiven if you are willing to apologize and learn from them, or how much damage you can do when you insist on clinging to your intention instead of recognizing your impact. Andrew David Thaler addresses this in his blog, Southern Fried Science. Even if you consider yourself well-versed in your understanding of oppression and privilege, you will, he says, eventually do or say something that reveals your privilege and is offensive. And you probably won't know that you've done it. The whole point of privilege is that it's largely invisible to those who have it, he continues. including you. If people in the broader community value the work you do, people will call you out on your privilege. How you respond to that criticism makes the difference between self-identifying as an ally and actually being an ally. There is a lot more to that blog and article, and I have other great articles on that subject that I'd be happy to share. And there are some other standards of excellence that I don't have time to go into. Be on time. Wear appropriate clothing. Don't be a know-it-all. Be content to give a cold glass of water. Serve in solidarity with others, not in charity. There are just too many to go into in one sermon, but I hope that you will read them when you get home. If at the end of this sermon, what you are taking away from this is that it's too much trouble or not worth it or too dangerous to volunteer because you're bound to make mistakes, then I have not done a good job writing this sermon. If what you are taking from this morning's message is a reminder to examine assumptions, enter humbly, and ask for what is most needed when you volunteer, then I guess I've done okay. You see, sometimes when we ride in on our white horse, we bring our own ragweed with us. We show up with our own internal limitations, preconceptions, prejudices, and hang-ups. And it hampers the good we are trying to do. But it doesn't mean we should stop showing up. Because we are human, sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we realize them ourselves, and sometimes we get called out on them. It's all part of the process. It's all part of the challenge. It's all part of the spiritual journey. We can't go back into the past and change the mistakes we've made, but we do have some power about how we move forward in the future. We can continue in the same way, or we can choose to learn from our experiences and do better. We can give up, or we can reaffirm our intention and become even more committed. Pema Chodron says, "Fortunately, when we break the commitment to take care of one another, it's easy to mend. We start by acknowledging that we broke it, that we hardened our heart or closed our mind, that we shut someone out. And then we can retake our vow on the spot or as a daily practice. We can reaffirm our intention to keep the door open to all sentient beings for the rest of our life. That's the training," she says, "of a spiritual warrior. The training of cultivating courage and empathy. The training of cultivating love." You must answer this question: what will you do with your gifts? Choose to bless the world. Amen, and blessed be.